It's back to school, up the gap. Now you see, we would have been off for like almost 10 weeks. A couple of weeks in June, all of July, all of August. But school starts in a few days. Now during those weeks, we would have gone crazy. We would have played cricket, bat and ball, tit-ma-two. We would have played hopscotch. We would have pitched marbles, played killer. And there was this massive growth of cane lily behind our houses. Little avenues and exits. And we had names for all these little entrances and exits. We'd go through one section, end up in another section. Sometimes we would eat our lunch and our dinner in these little areas. Now remember, cane lily was used for plaiting baskets, and we made our homemade dolls out of these cane lilies. Sometimes you'd be scratched and bleeding from the sharp edges, but we didn't care. We were having fun. Then next to my grandparents' house lived my great aunt, and at the back of her house was a massive clammy tree. Clammy cherries hanging from all the branches. It was unfortunate that you couldn't really eat these things. They looked so good. But sometimes if we got a bit hungry, we would just crack them open and taste them. But there were also red ants and black ants that inhabited these trees, or this tree. You'd go to get a clammy cherry or a bunch of clammy cherry, and those ants would just like eat you alive. But again, we didn't care. We were young, we were small, we were having fun. So by the time the summer finished, there we would be, cuts, scratches. Some of us would have had nail jokes, cracked toes, stumped toes, all sorts of bruises. But now my grandparents and my aunt would decide it was time to get us ready for school. Looking good, feeling better. And there was only one thing to do that job. The dreaded castor oil. Well, it's castor oil, but you know we Bajans, we always add a little something, so it was castor oil. But if you remember, castor oil served a couple of purposes. If you ran out of cream, you'd take a couple of drops of the castor oil, put it in your hand, add some water, rub it together, and that was your oil of Olay castor oil. Then for us girls, you remember sometimes they'd wash your hair and you'd run all around feeling so good that your hair was all opened. And by the time they were ready to fix your hair, it would have dried in the sun, go back to its natural state, all curly, should we say, and matted, and the castor oil would be warmed, and then they would part your hair and apply the castor oil. But we're not talking about that today. We are talking about that dose of castor oil you would get before school started back. Because remember, we would have played a lot of muddy cuckoo too. Making our cakes and our bakes and leaving them to dry in the sun. So of course, my grandmother would assume that we would have got on ringworms. So now you have to purge us and make us all nice and bright for school. So castor oil, there was a structure to it. It wasn't just willy-nilly. We knew the drill. Because you see, every Sunday, it was cod liver oil Sunday, or shark oil, or bitters. Not Marby bitters, worm bitters. If you remember, they had this little shrub in a green bottle, and sometimes you would see the roots. So we knew the drill when it came to take this castor oil. Now, this was the structure. My grandmother, I'm going to call her Dr. Grandmother, would be sitting in a chair with a spoon in her hand. So Dr. Grandmother would be ably assisted by Nurse Aunt, who stood by her side with the bottle of castor oil. So we would all line up according to age. Not my older brother, he was a bit older. So there we were, from 9 down, all lined up. Again, we knew the drill. You'd walk up to my grandmother, you would kneel, and my aunt would pour the dose of castor oil. Fill the spoon with that castor oil. Now your reward was a sliver of orange. Once you took that castor oil, you got a sliver of orange or a sliver of lime, whatever happened to be in the house at that time. So you walked up, the castor oil was poured in the spoon and put down your throat. You swallowed, you moved away, you took your sliver of orange or lime, whatever. But you know, there's always a protester. And that was my cousin Jeffrey. So when it was his turn, of course he'd walk up, kneel, and my grandmother would pour the castor oil down his throat. But like I say, he was a rebel with a cause. He was the Macbeth of our house when it came to taking castor oil. You remember Macbeth? Be bloody, bold, and resolute, 'cause none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Well, I guess his was, none of woman born shall give me this castor oil. So he would kneel, castor oil down his throat, and then you'd hear, it was as though a brook had welled up in his throat. He isn't swallowing the castor oil. And what would happen? My grandmother would hand the spoon to my aunt, and she would grab his nose. Nose grabbed, and the gurgling is getting louder. Nothing is happening. But then, you know how it works. The breathing goes with the throat, the nose. And then my grandmother would probably realize, okay, the maternal instinct has to take over. She would let go of his nose and that castor oil would be all over the place. So he would leave, still take his piece of orange, no castor oil. So whoever was behind him now would be emboldened, thinking they would do the same thing. But they didn't have the nerve. They would gurgle a bit. My grandmother is holding the nose, and eventually they would swallow the castor oil. So there it was. Every one of us, 6, 7 of us, dose of castor oil, one outhouse. Thank God we never had any accidents. So that was it. You wash your hair, they scrubbed you down, and you were ready for school. So that's the castor oil episode for today. But share your stories with me, because I know every house in Barbados had a designated Sunday for castor oil, cod liver oil, or shark oil. Tell me your stories. Did you run and hide when it was time for your castor oil? This was a tradition, the back to school castor oil day. So see you next time on Up the Gap. Here I go. Help me, Lord. Can I do it? Bottoms up.